Hello and welcome to the Ishbitz Razin Institute. We are going to be studying texts from the Ishbitz Rebbe. How do you know when to do things according to the law or to be an outlaw in order to do what God really wants you to do? So that's one of the more dangerous questions that has landed a lot of people in jail. Vayhi b'nei Yisrael b'midbar matzu ish makoshesh etzim b'yom Shabbat. Now they were back in the desert. The children of Israel went into the desert, and after the Exodus, and God said, "Let there be Shabbos," and there was Shabbos, but He didn't really get it. There was a place called Mara, where certain laws were taught to us. And one of them was keeping the Sabbath. Now, all of a sudden, on that first Sabbath, there was maybe the second one. There was a man. He might have been called Slavchad. I don't want to get the name wrong. Just, I don't say anything bad about anybody. But let's say he was named Slavchad, right? And he went out, and they found him gathering sticks on Shabbos. So what did they do? They killed him. So. The Meha Shiloach, the Rabbi Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz, says the following about the man who was gathering sticks on Shabbos. And he says, Yesh tu'unot shemen u'levona, shemen v'lo levona, levona v'lo shemen. There are different kind of sacrifices in the temple. Some are called menachot. They are the grain offerings. Were brought, vegetarian offerings brought in the temple. Some of them needed frankincense and oil, or rather oil and frankincense, and there were some that needed oil without frankincense, and some that needed frankincense without oil. So, what is oil? What is the meaning of oil? Oil teaches about a certain thing that brings beauty or harmony from an action that a man or woman does to bring beauty or harmony to his or her life. That is to say that a man is righteous and pure in the depths of the person's heart, and that person's intentions should be for the sake of heaven, as is explained in its place. So that's oil. Now, what in the world does oil have to do with righteousness? What in the world does oil have to do with tiferet lo min ha'adam? Something that we do, that an individual does in order to show beauty, to show goodness in the world. Now, oil is something that you use to light a fire, and the fire illuminates, so that illumination from within to without. So therefore, that's the way to understand the connection between oil and something you do to make your world a more beautiful, more illuminated place. So what is frankincense, or levana in Hebrew? Frankincense teaches about something that other people perceive as good, that other people will say that's a beautiful thing that person is doing. First, the oil is from within, that you yourself do something to shine out your goodness, and the other is levana is from without. So oil soaks into something that's from within and shining without. Frankincense is burned, and it has to be. It's more external. It doesn't soak in. It's a substance, a rock, a mineral, or something. So the frankincense teaches about how other people perceive you from the outside. So the Meah Shiloach, the Ishbitz Rebbe, says that the person needs to see that all of his actions will both be his own personal expression of his goodness from within to without, and also that from the outside that they will be perceived by the world as good. That's at the outset. But sometimes, the Exegesis of Numbers says, there is a time to do solely for God, where a person doesn't need to care about how other people perceive him. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. But when a person knows in the very depths of his being that what he's doing is right and what God wants him to do, then he doesn't have to look at the way the other person, the world, the way other people perceive him, the way his community perceives him. It's between him and God. That's as it is written in the Psalms. It says, "Et lasot laHashem." It is a time to do for God, for they have voided your Torah. It's in Psalm 119, verse 126. It's a time to do for God because they have made your Torah void. And the explanation is sometimes a person has to actually break the Torah in order to keep the Torah. For instance, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi broke the Torah. One of the greatest rabbis of the Talmud, around over 2,000 years ago, wrote down the Mishnah, or perhaps just under 2,000 years ago, wrote down the Mishnah. Now, this was a sin. It was the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and the scrolls of the prophets and the writings. They were written down. It's the written Torah. The oral Torah it was a sin to write it down. It had to be transmitted experientially by going to the Chacham, going to the Tana, the one who knew the law and who could recite the law by memory. They made the Torah alive, the oral Torah, which explains the correct explanation of the written Torah. So, by writing down the oral law, it was a sin. Why did Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi do a sin? Because he saw that the Torah would have been forgotten. The oral law was getting complicated. People were sages were bringing in contradictory material. There was incorrect transmissions. So he sat down with the top minds of his generation, and they edited the Mishnah and wrote it down so there would be no question about what it said. It was written down. It was in black and white. That's a time to do solely for God. He had to break the law in order to do the law. Other examples of breaking the law in order to break the law in order to protect the law, or to break the law in order to do what God really wants, is Elijah on Mount Carmel. When Elijah said it was forbidden to offer sacrifices outside of the temple in Elijah's day. So Elijah had, in order to show that the idolaters were nothing, and that the one God of Israel is the one God of the whole world, and he is the only one that we should pray to, that Elijah offered sacrifices on Mount Carmel outside of the Temple of Jerusalem. Mount Carmel is up in a few hours north, some 100, 200 kilometers north of Jerusalem. So he offered, even though he broke the law in order to disrepudiate the idolaters and to exonerate God and to show honor to God. Sometimes we find the opposite. We find that a person has an intention for the sake of heaven, and it's still forbidden according to the Torah. That's like Slavcha. That's like the one who was gathering sticks on Shabbos. Even though his intentions were for the sake of heaven, as we see in the Midrash and Targum Yonatan, still he was punished, because God doesn't want a person to put himself into an uncertain situation where there's a conflict between the Torah and between his own God's will may be blessed. Just as it appeared, something falls onto a person that's beyond him, that is not in his own hands. That it's something when it's beyond. If somebody's asking themselves, watching this, How do I know when something's for the sake of heaven, something that God wants me to do, and it's against the Torah? How do I know what should I do? Don't, if it's your own ego involved, if it's just something that you want, if it's your own desires, then it's wrong. Then don't do it. However, if it is beyond you and you have no ego invested in it, then you choose what God wants to do, no matter what's written in the law. It has to be on the level of Yehuda and Nasi writing down the Mishnah, or Elijah offering a sacrifice on Mount Carmel. It wasn't of their own decision. It was beyond them and put upon them, as opposed to them deciding to do it. In that time, you don't look for what brings beauty from the eyes of your surroundings. But at the outset, initially, one does not put himself into such a situation of uncertainty, because in the outset, one has to make sure that everything he does is right by man and by God. Be well.